think you guys pretty much nailed all of them. The biggest thing I remember about using the word processor over Google Docs was just this idea of like, if I had a version of a document I wanted to share with somebody, I had to send it through email. Hopefully it wasn't too big. And then they change it and they'd send it back to me. And if they were savvy users, they knew how to do like the track changes piece. But a lot of people didn't. So you ended up having these like million versions of a Word document. And you're like, which one was it? And it was so frustrating. So to me, that was a big selling point for Google Doc. Just this collaboration piece made it so much quicker and easier. Google Doc allows us to export actually a variety of features, which we'll talk about, or a variety of methods, not just a PDF, which Word, I'll say Microsoft Word does. It's just that it's a little herky-jerky. And then there's this other feature, and I'm not sure I caught it in the thing, but in the chat, but these documents don't necessarily live on your computer. So in a Google Doc, they're in the cloud. That means I can access them on any device, anywhere. And so I no longer have this issue of these documents tied to a computer, that if the computer, say you're in a boat going out to tie a meat and your boat gets swamped with water, your computer's gone. And that means maybe all your documents if you didn't back up. So that Google Cloud piece offers that. So I think that in terms of why we use Google Docs, I think there's so many bits and features. It's hard for me to go back to using Word. Not that I need to sell anybody on it, but just this thing about how we use Google Docs. I think that's a base piece in thinking about sort of new uses and where that might take us. So let's think about now this document here. I'm going to scoot this down. I want you to kind of look at this example document picture that I have here. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you can see. And can you see, let's see, maybe that's too much. What I'm hoping you're able to see is some of the arrows in there. And I want you to kind of put in the text box for me. What are some interesting things that you see that maybe you haven't thought about before? So look at some of those red arrows there and think about, is there anything that is pointing at a specific thing that you're like, oh, I didn't think about using that, or I didn't even know that was there. You can just, type those in the text box. So name the current version. Good. What else? Yeah, Tana, that squiggly arrow, that's kind of new, maybe in the last year and a half, 2 years. We'll talk about that one. That's a good one. Yes, I will, Pepper. And I'll put it in presenter mode, and then I'm not sure that's going to help. It kind of gets locked into that particular screen. Does that make it a little bit easier to see? The crooked line. Yes, it looks like an arrow. Yeah. Yeah, and Teresa, I'm so glad you said that. That same line is used in Google Classroom to go to the gradebook, but that doesn't mean the same thing in here. And it's so interesting that Google chose that symbol. And I'm so glad you pointed that out, because I was looking at that. I'm like, oh, that's actually not that great of design feature. I'm like, oh, that could be confusing. Yes, publish to the web, Gina. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, why would somebody do that? Exactly. So some of this, it sounds like some of this stuff might be old stuff and some of it might be new. So what I want to do is take just a second and kind of look at some of these really interesting features that are on here. And I'll kind of hit some of the ones that came up first. And then if you have other questions, we'll jump back into there. So if you feel comfortable and you want to open up a Google Doc so you can play at the same time, I would recommend doing that. I'm going to take just a second and I'm going to share a Google Doc that's just a whatever Google Doc. Let's see, a Chrome tab. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and just share my whole window. That way you have access. There we are. Okay, so it's forcing me to pick a very specific document, so that's fine. Inside of here, let's start with the squiggly line. And I just realized that I'm in my personal account, so give me just 2 seconds. I'm gonna actually switch it because as I mentioned earlier, some of those features only show up if you're in a school district account. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put in that, grab my school district account one and use that. So if you have your Google Doc opened, and hopefully you are in a school district one. Okay, you'll be able to see the squiggly line. So that squiggly line, I'm going to hover over that first so you can see it. Just thinking about it. If I click that open, it's an activity dashboard. And this is exciting. It means that I can come in here and look to see who I've shared the document with, how many times they viewed it, what they've done in it, the comments that have trended in it, and the sharing history. So let's say I've shared a document with somebody and then they shared it with somebody else, but then they remove that person. I can see all of that. And then of course it gives me the privacy settings. And this is fantastic because if you share something, let's say with your entire school, you can pop in here and see who's been in to have a look at it. And that's a really great feature, especially with students, I think. That gives me a chance to kind of get an idea of like, well, who's been doing what in the document? That matches the feature over on the left for taking a look at the version history. So if you were to open up the version history, and this is the thing that is always one of my favorites, is you can always come into the version history. If something got erased or deleted or something, you can pop in here and take a look to see the last version. Okay, so now here's your trick, teachers. When I teach kids about this, that I know this is here, I don't tell them that it literally saves every, I want to say like 30 seconds. And it even depends on you, like your internet, so how slow or how fast that is. So there could be a case where something gets added in 30 seconds and then removed in 30 seconds. And you can imagine the trouble that kids can get into with this. I never say that to a kid. In fact, I just say to the kids, I can see everything that you do in here. And I can track exactly when changes happen. And I can see who just does what changes. And so this is a great moment too, as a teacher, like if you're collaborating with other teachers, you can go and the feature that it gave you for the naming the version history, that is like, hey, this is our version 1 before we got together as a group and collaborated. And then after that meeting, you can do a version 2 or whatever you want to call it. And that's super helpful because then it sets a tracking system for each one. Now, imagine if you're an ELA teacher and your kids are learning to write papers or paragraphs, how awesome to be able to see each version that a kid goes through, to see that revision process. And then how awesome for the kid to be able to celebrate those, like, wow, I started here and now I'm ending up here. That's a great skill for a kid to have, to be able to track those changes. You could do the same thing in math. Same idea, tracking that success in terms of like processing through problem solving. Okay, so some of the other ones that came up besides those two, because those ones are great. I love those two features. Those are super helpful. Let's talk about the publishing to the web. Tell me, has anyone published a Google Doc to the web, and why have you published it to the web? You can either unmute your mic or you can just add it in the text box. I know, it's like, who would do that? Me. so in all of my tech dorkiness, I'm like, oh, I could do that. Let's try it. So there's actually a really good reason. So a lot of times I'll make Google Sites or any website, whatever you want to use, Weebly. And a lot of times I want to be able to put something together that is an information source, but it changes rapidly. An example might be like a weekly schedule to say that has links and things like that. I would embed that Google Doc page as a web page in my website, because then I don't have to go change the website. I just change the Google Doc. It's an instantaneous change. It also means that I can, if there's several people collaborating on that document together, that document's published to the web. I don't have to give those people access to the website. I just give them access to the document. So there's this sort of interesting idea of, wow, here I have this document that we can collaborate on. It's published to the web, but my group is working on making the changes in it. So now kind of imagine what that might look like for your classroom. So this to me is like a very comfortable way to control publishing student work that's being worked on together. You can control a lot of what gets that piece published, especially if the material is constantly changing. I'm sure you'll come up with lots of other ideas and ways to do it. That's just one of the ways that I've used it, because it's a lot easier to manipulate and change something on a Google Doc than I would necessarily on a whole website. You could do the same thing, by the way, with sheets. I've published spreadsheets to the web. I've published, well, obviously forms you can put it embed on a website. There's all kinds of reasons, but that's the typical, like, you're just thinking like, I want this into my worldwide audience, but I don't necessarily want them to have access to changing or editing the document, but I want it in a location that anybody can access, but not necessarily a link. So it's that kind of thinking that you're going to go through. Yes. Oh, yes, exactly, Tana. Like maybe, Google Slides is a perfect, another good example, publishing Google Slides. And in some ways, Google Slides is a lot prettier to do that. Google Docs, I guess I just would come back to the idea of like larger chunks of text or information sources. I know another example might be our school district has kind of generated a fact page about like questions the community's had about starting school in the fall. And so that page is constantly changing, and that's one that could get embedded into the website because other people are managing that Google Doc and they don't need to mess with the website. Okay, so that's sort of this idea of publishing to the web. I'm hoping you guys also caught below that email collaborators, just right below that, published to the web. And I cannot tell you how many times I've used that. Sometimes it's just, if I need my group to know something quickly and I know they're going to get it through email, I can email collaborators. It automatically attaches in the email. The Google Doc attaches in the email, and it'll kind of encourage them to go have a look at we need to get this done kind of thing. You could also do it by adding comments on the side of the Google Doc, but I've found more success in sending an email than adding a comment because those emails kind of get shuffled in my email or in people's email boxes. So the email collaborators seems to get a little bit more attention. Couldn't tell you why. So I'll just quickly talk briefly about the language piece, just because we're in this page. I don't know how many of you know that you can change the language of your Google Docs. So if you want to type something up in a whole nother language, you just come in here, change the language, and it'll automatically, you can just begin typing in that language. There is also a tool, a translate document. So if you don't know another language and you want to, say, take that Google Doc newsletter and translate it for a version for your families, or parents, you can do that here. Just be aware, it's Google Translate. It's not perfect. So having somebody spot check things for you might be a good idea. And then right below that is this voice typing. And if you have not used that yet, I cannot encourage that enough. For our kids, our special needs students, or I use it quite often. I sometimes find it super efficient just to be able to talk through a paragraph than to have to type it. And for our students who are perhaps more verbal and can actually explain something verbally better than typing something, this is a fantastic tool. So I can't encourage that enough. They don't actually like, well, do they call it an accessibility feature? Not necessarily. They just put it in there and made it available for anybody and everybody kind of thing. Let me pause there because I just kind of hit on a bunch of different things. Are there any questions that you have so far? Did anyone find something new and interesting that you think you might be able to use? Okay, good. So how about in the text box, take just a quick second, and I want to talk about add-ons. Please share in the text box your favorite Google Doc add-ons so far that you've used or that you want to use. Share in the text box your favorite add-on. Any others? Oh, okay, interesting. Okay, good. It's not. There's a couple that I use. There's an add-on that you can use. It was a little bit. They have a couple tools for just like general text formatting, which are nice, but they've changed that. So now those tools are actually part of the regular tools. I don't know if anybody's used Kaizena before. I kind of like it, kind of don't. It just depends on the day. I kind of back and forth. But Kaizena acts a little bit like a really full-featured commenting, grading piece for Google Docs. So it's pretty useful for Google Classroom, I think, in terms of matching Google Docs with Google Classroom and giving feedback. And I believe I was able to give audio feedback. I think it's updated quite a bit since I last used it. But it's like that full feature sort of, you're able to really give enriched feedback to students on the document. The other one that I've used is word clouds. And I'm still kind of dorky on the word cloud thing. I really love word clouds. I think they're interesting. I think it's a good way for a kid who's like a struggling writer to be able to put their document in a word cloud and see that they've used like a word a million times over and over and over again. So there is a word cloud add-on that you can do in there, which is kind of fun. But I would encourage you to like take some time at some point when you got like, I know teachers never have 5 minutes, but if you were to have 5 minutes, go poke in there and see what other add-ons there are. So Moat, I have not heard of Moat. And Tammy is saying, Tammy, you want to just briefly talk about that? Because that's going to be new to me.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, so actually Moat is a fairly new one for me, and it actually, it's an extension. I'm using Chrome, so it's an extension there. And when I use docs, doc sheets and slides, and I want to make a comment, then I can actually voice record it. And if the other user has Moat as well, they can record the reply to my comment. So we can actually make comments in our voices instead of just typing.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think you brought up a really good point, Tammy. I think that some of these like Kaizena and Moat, I think they do require both the end user and the teacher to have the tool. So that's good to remember. And yeah, that's cool. I'm gonna have to also check that out because that sounds pretty interesting.
Christina, how do you spell Kaizena? What are you saying and how do you spell it?
Oh, it's, I'll pull it back up on the screen. It's Kazei excuse me, Kaizena. Kaizena. Yeah, Pepper, I agree. I think that's a really, thanks. I think that's a really good point. Okay, so there was something I wanted to, Tabby, just so you know, your microphone is still on.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. So I also wanted to point something else out on the side. Let's get back to my screen here. Over on the right-hand side of Google Docs is a little white bar. Are you guys able to see that little white bar, or look on your own Google Doc? And there's like 3 pictures. There's a calendar, there's a Google Keep, and then there is, looks like a little pen, kind of.
Yep, we see yours.
Perfect. So I don't know if anybody has used these before. I think it's like an absolutely brilliant way of Google Doc to have sort of made this, make it so that you can work between the different applications. So if you actually click that little calendar there, it pops up your Google Calendar associated with that account. And then if I'm like, oh, hey, I need to share this with my teachers tomorrow, I just build a new meeting, and right down below, it automatically attaches that document as part of the meeting. And when I add my guests, that document goes to those guests. It will automatically get shared with them so that you have this sort of seamless process of, oh yeah, I need to meet with them. We need to go over this document kind of thing. And I think that is just brilliant of Google to really sort of like think about putting that together and making that really easy for teachers to do. So just like there's the little calendar feature, there's the little Keep feature. So one of the things that I like to use with my Google Keep is like all these little notes that I have to kind of remember about things, which is like, I just ask like, when is trash day again? So, but stuff like as a teacher, we have so many things to remember. And if I need to reference it in a document, I can just quickly open up my Keep, grab that information and dump it in, or vice versa. If I'm going through a document that somebody else has shared with me and there's a particular date or a particular bit of information that I need to note for later, I can jump it over into my Keep. And I think that there was a Keep session. I think somebody did a Keep session. I'm not really sure. The last one is tasks, which I do think Chelsea covered. And tasks are literally just that. They're like a to-do list. So imagine just sort of like as your teacher, you're writing your lesson plan for the week, and you're like, oh, I need to remember to go pick up the dry ice for the experiment. Okay, put that in my task. So I think that, again, just sort of being efficient at utilizing those tools together is a really smart way that we can be as teachers to utilize that collaboration and efficiency to get things done. So I don't know how often people know that those are there, but they are there. And now somebody, Tana, I'm hoping maybe you'll chime in. There's a lovely feature that a lot of kids still don't know about, but I try to teach it everywhere I go. What is the coolest thing about citations and or pictures with Google Docs?
Are you talking about you're not talking about an add-on, are you?
No, I'm definitely just talking about like the regular old Explore feature.
Yeah, the research. I haven't gotten in there lately, honestly. I know that you can go in, and it's been long enough that I can't remember all the pieces of it, but I know you can go in, you can find it, and you can cite it right into it in the right APA or MLA or whatever. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely amazing how you can just import it right there and cite it, and yeah. You're still on mute.
You're muted.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, this I really want you guys to make sure you teach your kids this, just because it's one of those things that it starts the conversation about, hey, we can't just plagiarize. If we're going to use something from the web, let's talk about copying that information, citing it, and then after that we can have the conversation about appropriate citation format. And I think that's super useful, that having that tool there. the images piece is right there as well. And then this new one is Drive. So for those of you who are making hyperdocs, which we didn't really talk a lot about, but if you're doing hyperdocs, this becomes a really useful tool for like locating that document that you're going to link out to. So this year, hooray, I'm so excited because it's my first year back in a while into the classroom. What a year to pick to come back to the classroom, which is not really a classroom yet, but maybe. That's going to be my syllabus. It'll be all hyperdocked or hyperlinked in a hyperdoc so that kids have that as a regular jumping point for all sorts of materials that they need. So yeah, another really fun way to use a Google Doc because it can be ever changing.
Let me jump right in just for a second while you're talking about citations. I did teach kids separately from Google Doc. I did teach kids, sorry, I realized I don't have my camera on. I did teach kids how to use EasyBib, which moves right in easily as an extension. It was really, really super simple. So in some ways, the teachers liked it better, the EasyBib. But yeah, either way, I ended up teaching EasyBib last year and not the Embedded Explorer. So that EasyBib extension really was super simple, and I had like every 7th grader last year used it. It was super easy.
Perfect, Hannah. Exactly. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That is a good one to be using, and that will be one of your add-ons. Is it an add-on or a
It is an extension.
Okay.
The only way that the way I distinguish it, maybe it's not right, is the add-on is in that add-on menu, or is extensions are up in the top, like over by your picture. So yep. It's like a little orange book over by the extensions.
Yep. So that's perfect. So if you want to do the extension, just make sure that you can add those. Those will get kind of added to the browser and not necessarily to the in each individual application. Okay, so I'm gonna switch back over to that presentation that was up, and if you guys have any questions as we're going, or if there's some other features that you're sort of curious about, do let me know. I just want to show you, to kind of wrap up with a couple other things that I came across that I thought was really interesting. And I think that, Chelsea, this presentation is linked. Was it linked in the calendar link, or it goes out someplace? If not, I will go ahead and share and put it in the chat before I end here. This is actually clickable. I'm asking that because this is a clickable. It'll take you straight to where Google references this. But I loved all these really interesting ideas that they were having when they were talking about Google Docs. And I like this idea, like, what about digital portfolios to house student work? And so here's that hyperdoc feature again, where, a kid could be starting like, here's my table of contents, and then here's my samples of my work, like really easy for a kid to put together. And then we talked about a lot of these, like the enhancing, the Explore tool. One of the things I didn't talk about, but is probably a really interesting idea for coming in the fall, is this idea of designing a co-collaboration of a agenda for a week. So this would be really something after you scaffolded the learning with your students. You can't just throw them into this at the beginning of the year. You would start with like an agenda for the week that the kids would have. And then following like that agenda, you'd say, okay, next week I want you to add one thing that you're going to be doing for this particular standard or objective. And then the next week, you're going to say to them, okay, well, I want you to change up these 2 areas. So this idea of like learner becoming an independent learner on this Google Doc, you're sort of collaborating on an agenda each week and how that plays out in a student's world. And this might be really useful for having kids at home with maybe not as much guidance, and they need a lot more support to be independent learners. And so that scaffolded process of learning how to do that might be really effective. And that's a really easy thing to do on a Google Doc. So the other thing that I wanted to share were, there we go, features. So I obviously did not cover there's probably a ton more features that are just sneaky, hidden away in there. For example, we didn't even talk about transfer ownership of a file. There's some tricks that you can do to transfer a file. It's easy within a school district. It gets a little tricky when you move outside of a school district. So there are some things you can do. But this is also linkable. So when you get the slides, you can click on each one to go kind of explore if you're in need of that thing. The other thing we didn't really talk about, because a lot of people already know a lot about the sharing features, but there are some of the new features that you can share within a time frame. So you can give them access to it like for 2 days or something, and then that gets revoked. So that's an interesting idea in terms of like, well, I want my parents to have access to this document for the beginning of the school year, but then I know another one's going to come through that I'm going to need to completely give them that's different. And so I will revoke that access and give them the new access to this. So just as there's probably a million different ideas of how you might use that, but that being just one. The other thing that we didn't talk about at all, but it's in there and it's really sneaky, is that automatic outlines in Google Docs. And it's really useful for, again, beginning writers or people who've never used an outline before to write. So just, and then we need to talk about the flowcharts. So there's lots more in here to just keep in mind, like there's a lot of goodness in Google Docs, and to feel free to come back in here and click through and look for anything that's specific in here that you're looking for. Is there any, I know, Tana, there's tons of features. Is there any questions about Google Docs that maybe there's, before we end up, that you want me to show you about, or does somebody want to take a second and share like one of your favorite things that you do? Yeah, that's what I'm curious about too. Chelsea, is how is everybody else using Google Docs? So I'm going to mute my microphone. You can either unmute your microphone and share, or you can put it in the chat box below or on the side. And I'm so glad you mentioned that. So I know Chelsea, the reason Chelsea wanted me to do this session was because one of the main ways that the group of EdCamp folks, when we were getting together and planning for EdCamp, was really primarily through Google Docs. And the fact that you can be working on that document and putting things in together at the same time, we would have these rapid 15, 20-minute meetings, be done, and move on. Because we are all very busy. I just think it was super key and essential to having that as part of your collaboration piece, especially now. I know a lot of us are going to be using that in our team meetings. The agendas are great though, because especially if you know the agenda changes rapidly, it's good to be in a Google Doc. PLC notes, Pepper, yes, I completely forget about PLC notes. That's another great one, especially if like historical, like tracking like your changes and things through time. That would be really interesting to see in those PLC notes. And I know like you guys are sharing them with your principals, and what a great way for principals to be able to sort of track what's going on in PLCs. Yes, and another one, lesson plans. I think that's super, super useful, especially, I know, like mine change every period almost, it seems like sometimes. Shared notes and workshops. Yeah, that, it kind of blew my mind. I just assumed everybody did that. Like if you go to like a conference or something, and I just assumed that was like something everybody, but I guess not. And I think it's so helpful because maybe there's a session I don't get to go to and somebody else took notes on it, and then I have those notes. That might be a great one for if you guys are going to do like the beginning of fall PD in your school districts. That might be interesting to kind of team up with a group of folks and share notes with that.
Christine.
Hey, Mary.
Happy day. I've been teaching I'm up at the university and I'm working with pre-service teachers. And this summer I'm teaching teaching with technology class, very perfect timing. So I stumbled upon, and I put it in the chat, I stumbled upon this resource that Google has created for teachers called Applied Digital Skills. And because one of the things that I found with a group of pre-service teachers, but I also think that we run into it in the schools too, is that the foundational skill level for technology capacity it's, not everybody comes in at the same skill set. So what I was trying to do over the last 10 weeks is every week I was assigning one of these lessons from this applied digital skills piece. And the lessons are developed for middle school and high school teachers, but they embed the use of each of the pieces. Like we did Google Docs where they had to design a playlist, and it takes you through designing a music playlist using a Google Doc. One of them is, create a, it's not design, it's create a playlist, create a digital schedule, et cetera. So I really think the group would really appreciate these skills. The pre-service teachers really like them too.
That is an excellent resource. And Teresa, I saw you going thumbs up on it too. It looks like something you went through also.
Yeah, I don't even remember how I stumbled across it this summer. I'd never heard of it. But I've looked at several of the modules and they're beautifully structured and they're detailed, and they seem, I guess I haven't looked at all of them, of course, but they seem really well done. And as I think about preparing my students to establish professional digital lives, it's very foundational in that, there's how to write a good email, and that one is a robust one. It's not going to take them a lot of time, but it's going to fill in all those gaps, right? Or some of the things they've not thought about, or some of the things that we might forget to mention that kind of ups the professionalism. So I'm super excited about using them with kids, and it's and so good for our remote situation this fall, because not to say that we, of course we need to structure it and scaffold it and this and that, but they seem really, really ready to go.
They really are the opportunity to see the benefit of being on the other side of it as a teacher, and also learn myself, right? And they include rubrics, they include exemplars, they include video. And
the videos are great.
Great videos. So I would recommend y'all take a look at it.
Cool. I love it when I get new resources. That's good. I love it.
They just did them. May 28th is when they launched.
Okay. So I think that Chelsea, I think that'll be a good one we can add to the Google group. And maybe I'll do that as soon as we're done. That way, folks who might have. Well, I guess you're right. I think, Chelsea, I remember now, we add the slides and then I can add those other resources into the Google group discussion afterwards. That way everyone will have access to it. Any other last thoughts or ideas or resources that you want to share out? Okay, so Chelsea, there was this last slide on here. I don't know if you want me to talk about that or if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I'll talk about it. Thank you for pulling it up. So these are just announcements we do at the end of our meeting, just kind of logistic things. So first, you can see the bit.ly for this presentation, and then you'll be able to access the hyperlinks on this page, as well as the hyperlinks that Christina has posted throughout. We really encourage you guys all to join our Google group. Like the conversation we just had right now between Mary, Teresa, Christina was awesome. The whole purpose of the Google group is to asynchronously share resources. So you guys just shared that Applied Digital Skills website with us. That'd be a perfect example of somebody going on and just posting to the group saying, hey, found this really cool Google resource, just want you guys to check it out. Or, hey, I did this really awesome thing in my classroom using Google Tools and this is how it went, check it out. Just so we're sharing continually just what we're doing in our classes, because it is beneficial to everyone, because everybody looks at different things all the time. So we really encourage that, not only just to sign up for the Google group for just announcements, but for you to get on and share, or even ask questions if you have them and need them addressed in the moment, maybe that a PD doesn't offer. Our next event is next Tuesday. It's I Love Google Forms, and here's why with Tana Martin, who is on here. You can sign up at our same registration link, or if you go to our GEG Alaska website, you can see the calendar, and it has all of our events, plus videos from past sessions, links to register, all that good stuff. And then lastly, we would love your feedback. So if you wouldn't mind going to this bit.ly link and filling out, going to the bit.ly link to get this hyperlink to fill out the survey, we would really appreciate it. Just so we know what we should do in the future to better serve you guys. Those are all of the announcements. Thank you so much for coming, especially with the technical difficulties. Tana and I already checked the link for next week, and it works with school and personal domains. So we have no idea what happened this week, but thank you for navigating here and sticking with us. We really appreciate it. And especially to those who continually come back, we really appreciate that as well. Feel free to unmute your mic and say any comments that you have, or say goodbye, or ask Christina about her life in New Mexico, or otherwise, thank you for joining and hope to see you guys next week.
So good to see everyone. Thank you.
Yeah.